الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أشهد أن عليا ولي الله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين وأبناءه المعصومين حجج الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد هيا على الصلاة هيا على هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على هيا على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم اجعل قلبي بارا وعيشه كارا وعمله سارا ورزقه دارا وأولادي أبرارا واجعل لي عند قبر نبيك محمد مصطفى صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم مستقرا وقرارا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وآله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على خير العمل هيا على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباءهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا عليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم إن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون واتخذوا من دونه آلهة إن يردنا الرحمن بالضر لا تغني عنا شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعدي من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فهم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا مهترون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعنب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مسلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآيات لهم أنا حملنا ذرية في فلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا نتم من لا يشاء الله أتما إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفق في السور فإذا هم الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع الذين مهترون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قول من رب رحيم امتاز اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لتمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسكناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نؤمره ننكس في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند مهترون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام ويحيي الرميم قل يحيي الذي أنشاها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة عين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا أبا الحسن يا علي يا بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا أبا الحسن يا علي يا ابن محمد أيها الهادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وسي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله بين يدي حاجاتنا
اشفع لنا عند الله.
حاجات. يا سادتي ومواليا إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالمين من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين.
اے شمر ذرا کچھ رحم تو کھا یہ چھوٹی زہرا ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے اے شمر ذرا کچھ رحم تو کھا نادان حزینہ ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے نہ مار اسے نازوں سے اسے شبیر نے پالا ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے سجاد کی بہنا کو غازی کی بتیجی کو مانگا ہے کنیزی میں اس پھول سی بچی کو اس پھول سی بچی کو شہ نے اپنے سجدوں میں جسے اللہ سے مانگا ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے دوڑیں گے اگر ناقے کس طرح سے سنبھلے گی گر راہ میں گر جائے آواز کسے دے گی آواز کسے دے گی پشتے ناقہ پر کیوں تنہا رسی سے باندھا ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے۔ کیا جرم کیا اس نے، کیوں اس کو رلاتا ہے، دکھلا کے سے پانی مٹی پہ بہاتا ہے، مٹی پہ بہاتا ہے۔ کیا تیری کوئی اولاد نہیں، کیوں ظلم یہ داتا ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے۔ رونے نہ دیا اس کو بابا کے لاشے پر، ہے نیل تماچوں کے معصوم کے چہرے پر، معصوم کے چہرے پر۔ اللہ جانے یہ اس پہ ستم کس بار کا بدلہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے۔ معصوم کی گردن میں باندھی ہے رسن سے، گھٹ جائے گا دم اس کا، میں تیز چلوں کیسے، میں تیز چلوں کیسے۔ یہ کہتا ہوا بیمار میرا خم ہو کے چلتا ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے۔ اے شمر ذرا کچھ رحم تو کھا، یہ چھوٹی زہرا ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے۔ صلوات۔
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، صلی اللہ علیک یا سیدی و مولاي یا رسول اللہ، صلی اللہ وسلم علیک یا سیدی و یا مولاي و ابن مولاي یا ابا عبداللہ، فاز من اعتصم بحبلكم وأمن من لجأ إليكم، يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع لذنوبنا وتبيب نفوسنا، أبي القاسم القاسم محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله، بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: والمؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Whenever we speak about the revolution of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, we find that many of the examination is directed towards the companions of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, those who stood alongside him on the 10th of Muharram. Not only those who stood alongside him on the 10th of Muharram, but those who were in association with his message even prior to the Battle of Karbala taking place, or even those who were part of his message far beyond the 10th of Muharram. Those who died before the tragedy of Karbala and those who died after the tragedy of Karbala. Each and every one of these personalities who in one way or another were associated with the message and the movement of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, they are seen to never be forgotten in the books of history. Their participation, for example, the likes of Hani ibn Urwa, the likes of Muslim ibn Aqil, the likes of, for example, those who came after, even during for example, the small uprisings that took place, Mukhtar al-Thaqafi and his followers, who tried to avenge the killing of what happened on the 10th of Muharram. And you find that this discussion is an interesting discussion, because many a times when we recount, many a times when we remind ourselves of the Battle of Karbala, we focus on the ashab of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. But what happens many a times is that we focus on the men more so than on the women. That's not to say that the women are forgotten entirely. No. It means that when we speak about the women who are part of the message of Abi Abdullah and the Thawrat al-Husayn and those who stood alongside him being part of his movement and his revolution against oppression and injustice, much of the light is given to Aqilat al-Zainab salamullahi alayha, or for example Kulthum, and rightly so because of their fiery sermons, because of their positions in Kufa as well as in Sham as well as in Medina, and what they did naturally in their lives after the 10th of Muharram. Because of course they were part of the Ahl al-Bayt as well, it gives them much more importance. But in tonight's discussion, what I want to discuss and focus on is the movement of those women who were part of the revolution of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salatu wassalam. And not much focus is given on these particular ladies, because you find that there were some ladies who helped Abu Abdullah alayhi salam before the 10th of Muharram. There were those who helped Abu Abdullah alayhi salam on the 10th of Muharram, and there were those who helped Abu Abdullah after the 10th of Muharram as well, as history has accounted and has told us. You find that in the ayah of the Holy Quran that I began with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He speaks about the whole concept of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, in the beginning of the ayah, He makes a very shrewd statement. He makes a very strong statement. He says, Al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minat ba'aduhum awliya'u ba'd, that the believing men and the believing women are considered to be friends and allies of one another. Meaning, يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. They engage in forbidding the evil and encouraging the good. this responsibility of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar is not just the responsibility that goes into the hands of the men. It is also a responsibility that goes into the hands of the women as well. When you examine the whole movement of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and the philosophy behind his movement, he makes it clear that the philosophy of his movement is Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. In this famous sentence that he delivers in Medina, before leaving towards the city of Mecca, what does he say? He says, I am not leading an uprising against Yazid ibn Muawiyah so that I am given a seat as the caliph, or to cause fasad and dissension, or because of the love of dunya, or because of. No. The reason as to why I am leading a revolution is to reinstate the madhab of my grandfather Rasulullah, Islah al-Ummati Jaddi Rasulullah, to reform the ummah of my grandfather. Through which method? Through the method of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. The whole incident of Karbala is a manifestation of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. So naturally we focus only on the men and the ashab of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, and say that those who gave their lives, those who were willing to give their lives for the movement of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, were those who upheld the message of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. Whereas when you dig deeper in the books of history, you realize that no, there were women also who were part and parcel of the movement of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. And these women, they too were the manifestations of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. And so let's discuss and examine some of these women and what position they played when it came to the whole incident of Thawrat al-Husayniyya, the whole revolution of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And this is a profound discussion for each and every one of us, whether we are male, whether we are female. In today's world, for example, a woman is given value. Of course, the values of this day and age is different to the values that society held 50 years ago. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, a valuable woman in society, a woman who was given value, was someone who raised good children, someone who remained in the house, someone who catered, for example, and looked after the affairs of the house and so on and so forth. Those values have changed in this day and age. In the 21st century, a woman of value, a woman of respect is a woman who has a good job, a woman who has a good title behind her name, a woman, for example, who has a good salary, a woman who can do the same work that a man can do. In the corporate world, for example, a woman is given value based on the position that she has in a particular company. I remember one word from one famous celebrity when he came forward and he said, why do you work your entire life for something that when you achieve it, you are proud of yourself for it? But when you die and you leave this world, you are replaced immediately within a few hours by another person. As in, imagine working your entire life to reach a position, maqam, a specific maqam in the eyes of the society, only to find that if you were to leave this world, people will mourn over you for a day or two and then they will move on with their lives. A company has to move on. And that position that you held, whether you are a man or a woman, you will be easily replaced by another. When you come from an Islamic perspective, Islam comes forward and explains to us that if you work for this dunya, you'll get this dunya. There's no shadow of a doubt in that. You will receive some of the pleasures of this dunya, but it won't help you whether you live as long as you live in this world and when you move on into the hereafter. The pleasures of this dunya can only help you so much. And in the reality of things, what it provides for the human being, in the reality is that it has no value at all. And so when you find, for example, from the Quranic perspective, when you come from the traditional perspective using the riwayat of the Ahl al-Bayt, alayhim as-salam, you realize that those who stand for the truth, those who, for example, hold the values of truth and morality, and you represent purity, for example, defending the message of the Ahl al-Bayt, defending the risala of Rasulullah, you find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will automatically give you a maqam that is far greater, that goes beyond the maqam of this dunyawi world. You find, for example, when you examine the lives of the women in history at the time of the A'immah alayhim salam, many of us scorn as to how they were treated. They were treated as second or third class citizens. Many of them, for example, did not have jobs the way we have jobs. Many of them, for example, did not have wealth the way we have wealth. Many of them did not have freedom and independency the way we have independency within our lives. And so we look down upon them, not knowing that their names have remained in the books of history. They have been immortalized because of their service to their Imams of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Whatever they did in their lives, whatever, for example, methods they incorporated to try and defend and uphold the values of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, Allah has allowed their names to be remembered even 1400 years later. Whereas our names, for example, are not even remembered by our sons and our daughters when we leave this world. And so, my discussion tonight is of three areas. Number one, with regards to the women that contributed, however they contributed towards the revolution of Imam al-Husayn, there are three types of women. The first were those women who were considered to be believers and their husbands were believers. The second type of women are those who were considered to be believers, yet their husbands were in between. They were neither believers nor disbelievers. And then the third type of women were those wives who were considered to be believers and their husbands were not seen as believers, and their sons and their family members were not seen as believers. And when I say that they were not considered to be believers, it doesn't mean that they were not Muslims. No, they were Muslims. Munafiqeen they were. Yes, those who supported the Banu Umayyah and the injustice and the oppression of the Banu Umayyah. And so, let's begin with the discussion. With regards to the revolution of Imam al-Husayn salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, there were women who were considered to be believers and their husbands were seen as believers. The likes of whom? The likes of, for example, Umar ibn al-Khuzai. He was one who was executed by Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan or Ibn Ziyad under the rule of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. You find, for example, the likes of Habib ibn Madahir. The famous story of Habib ibn Madahir, when Ibn Ziyad closes the streets of Kufa, and for example, checkpoints in Kufa, no one can enter or leave the city of Kufa. Ibn Ziyad did so to make sure that anyone in Kufa, no one in Kufa was able to join the camp of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam in Karbala. Habib ibn Madahir had to bid farewell to his son, Qasim, and he had to bid farewell to his wife. His wife, for example, did not stop him in any way, shape or form. In fact, she convinced him, she added conviction to his heart to go and support Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. She understood that her husband is one who supported Amir al-Mu'mineen, one who supported Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and now his heart was yearning, it was longing to support Imam Husayn alayhi salatu wassalam. And so she allowed him to go and fight for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. You know why these wives are considered to be very, very phenomenal in the position that they held? And why their husbands are considered to be profound human beings, is because when you examine the ashab of Rasulullah, you find that there are certain companions of the Holy Prophet. When the Prophet would come forward and declare jihad, jihad has now been made incumbent upon you, come and fight and defend the message of Islam, many of them would come forward and they would say, Ya Rasulullah, our houses are exposed, our houses are naked. In which way? If we go for jihad, then our children, they're not looked after. Our wives need our support and our help. Our responsibility, according to our understanding, is in our homes first and foremost. Jihad is a secondary issue for us. Allah condemns them in the Holy Quran in Surah At-Tawbah. Yes, when they came and they gave excuses participating from the battle of Ahzab, they used to come forward and they would say, Rasulullah, our wives and our children, they need greater help. They need more help than you do, than the Muslim army does from us. Let us stay behind and safeguard our houses. Yes, looking after the family is wajib. Allah condemns them using this type of logic. Why? Because once jihad al-asghar, has been made wajib, it is incumbent for you to go and serve the Imam of your time. Habib ibn Madahir, for example, He saw that it was necessary to support the Imam of his time. And he leaves his family, tawakkul ala Allah. He leaves his family under the care of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he goes. He knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look after his family. He knows that Allah will look after all of the affairs of his family when he is not there to look after the affairs of his family. So Habib ibn Madahir goes and he supports Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. Then you have, for example, the wife of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, his wife was whom? The sister of Umar ibn Sa'ad. Talk about a lineage. Umar ibn Sa'ad, who was the sole reason for the execution of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, his sister was Mukhtar al-Thaqafi's wife, and she supported Mukhtar al-Thaqafi when he led a revolution against Umar ibn Sa'ad and Ibn Ziyad and so on and so forth. Then you have, for example, the wife of Muslim ibn Awsaja. Very interesting, amongst the narrations between or shared amongst the Maqatil, there's a very interesting narration when it comes to Muslim ibn Awsaja. Muslim ibn Awsaja. Very interesting. They say, now bear in mind, some Maqatil speak about this, some reject that this ever happened. Nonetheless, as far as our discussion is concerned, it's something pertinent with regards to our discussion. They say that Muslim ibn Awsaja, when he knew that Abu Abdullah alayhi salam was in Karbala, he left the city of Kufa. He escaped from the city of Kufa to join the camps of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. But he wasn't alone. He took his wife and his son. His son went by the name of Khalf. His wife and his son both traveled to Karbala. On the day of Ashura, on the 10th of Muharram, they say that when Muslim ibn Awsaja came forward in the battlefield, he fought valiantly and he gave his life for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. When he gave his life for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, immediately his son then enters the battlefield. Now when his son Khalf ibn Muslim ibn Awsaja enters the battlefield, Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, Imam al-Husayn salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, turns to Khalf and he says, "Oh Khalf, I do not give you permission to fight. Come back and look after your mother." He was asked why. He said, "Because your mother, the wife of Muslim ibn Awsaja, is an elderly woman. If you leave your mother alone, then who will tend to her needs? Who will look after her? Her husband has just left this world, and now you will leave this world. There is no one else behind to look after her." He goes back to the tents. When he sees his mother, the wife of Muslim ibn Awsaja, says to him, "Oh my son, ya bunayya, why are you here? As in, why have you not given your life for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam?" So he speaks to her. He says, "Abu Abdullah has refused that I go into battle, that I must stay back and tend to your needs and look after you." She intervenes and she pleads Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. She says, "Ya Abu Abdullah, I have given authority and granted my child, my son, to go and fight." Now Khalf, she turns to her son, she says, "Ya bunayya, when it comes to two choices in your hands, when you have two choices in your hands, either supporting the sons of Rasulullah or looking after your own safety and your life, always choose to look after the sons of Rasulullah. Their safety and their lives comes first, and then your life comes second." It says, if you choose your life over the lives of the sons of Rasulullah, then I will never be pleased with you, and I will never be satisfied with you. Go and give your life for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. So he goes into the battlefield and he gives his life. He fights as a valiant warrior, and of course he is executed in the way of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. The point being is that the wife of Muslim Awsaja, not only was she a believer, but she convinced and she advocated the men of her family, her husband and her son, to go and give their lives for Imam Husayn alayhi salam. So they supported the movement of Imam Husayn alayhi salam by giving everything they had for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Then you have, for example, the wife of Wahab, the wife of Abdullah ibn Umair al-Kalbi. What a wonderful personality these two individuals were. They say when Abdullah ibn Umayr al-Kalbi saw the Kufans rallying against Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, he came forward and he narrates these lines. He came forward and he said, I, in my days, I have fought in many battles and many wars, and I have fought against the mushrikeen many a times. May Allah do not reward them for standing against the son of Fatima az-Zahra salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. He comes back to his wife. His wife says to him, Abdullah, what's this noise? Why have these people gathered in this place? He narrates to his wife, he says, these people, these Kufans, they're rallying against the son of Fatima, Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. They're on their way towards Karbala. They will execute the family of Rasulullah. He turns to his wife, he says, my wife, I have one request. She says, what is it? She says, let's go join Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Let's go join Abu Abdullah alayhi salam in Karbala. Let us stand alongside him. Let us give our lives with him. His wife doesn't object. His wife, in fact, what does she say? She says, my husband, you have hit the mark. And wallah, I pray that Allah hits his mark through you. Meaning what? Meaning, may Allah use you, my husband Abdullah, as an agent. Allah has decreed something. Allah has a plan. Let him make you part of his plan. They both go towards the city of Karbala. They enter the deserts of Karbala. They enter the camp of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. On the 10th of Muharram, very interesting narration. On the 10th of Muharram, they say a man in the opposition army came forward by the name of Yasir or Yasir. Yasir came forward and he said, I challenge you Muslims to a duel. Come forward and fight me. Habib ibn Madahir steps forward. Habib ibn Madahir, when he steps forward, Abu Abdullah alayhi salam says, Habib, no, it's not your time. Come, sit down. Burair steps forward. When Burair steps forward, Abu Abdullah alayhi salam says to Burair, Ya Burair, it's not your time. Come, step back. They say, Abdullah ibn Umayr steps forward. He says, Ya Abu Abdullah, let me fight this person. He's taunting you. He's embarrassing you. Let me go and fight him. They say, the narrations say that when Abdullah looked at, when Abu Abdullah alayhi salam looked at Abdullah, Abu Abdullah alayhi salam saw a man who was tall, tan-skinned, broad shoulders, strong forearms. He said, Ya Abdullah, go and fight. Abdullah enters the battlefield and he strikes, they fight, there's a scuffle, and he kills Yasir. A man by the name of Salim then comes to Yasir's aid. He engages in a fight with Abdullah. Abdullah then kills him as well. And then he comes back. When he comes back to the tents, interestingly, they say that after a few moments, he goes back for the second time to fight the enemies. When he goes back the second time, they say his wife, Wahab, she came running behind him with a spear in her hands. She said to him, my husband, take this with you and protect the sons of Rasulullah. Protect the sons and the daughters of the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she said, Wallah, my husband, I will join you and I will sacrifice myself with you. This is a woman who not only gives her husband in the path of Rasulullah, in the path of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, but she is more than willing to give her own life. The narration says she grabbed onto the armor of her husband and she wouldn't let go. Her husband would say, my wife, Wahab, go back, join the other women. She would say, no, I want to give my life alongside your life. This is what I dream. This is what I want. She says, no. He says to her, no, go back to the women. Abu Abdullah alayhi salam interjects. Abu Abdullah alayhi salam intervenes. He says, Wahab, come back to the women. Yes, this is not your fight to begin with. Come back to the women. Support yourselves. When Abdullah ibn Umar goes and he fights, he puts up a good fight, and then he is executed. When he is executed, they say Wahab comes to the body of her husband. She comes, she proceeds, she finds her husband's body and she sits down alongside it. When she sits down alongside it, she begins to wipe the blood off his face. She begins to try and clean his holy face. And then she begins to cry, she begins to lament, she begins to weep. Hani alak ya habibi. Yes, Allah has now granted you Jannah for giving your life for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. She's caressing the face of her husband, caressing the hair and the head of her husband, until Shimr ibn Dhul Joshan, he saw what was going on. He heard the words of this woman. He turns to his slave Rustam. He says to Rustam, Ya Rustam, go and strike this woman. Rustam comes with an iron pole in his hands. He comes behind this woman and he strikes this woman on her head. When he strikes this woman on her head, due to the severity of the blow, the extremity of the blow, she dies immediately. She collapses on the chest of her husband as if she is embracing him, and she leaves this world. You find that in the whole tragic saga of Karbala, she was the only woman who was killed, who was executed. The only first female martyr in the entire battle of Karbala, Wahab. And so you find that amongst the first group or the first classification of women, these women were considered to be believers, and they supported their husbands to go and give their lives for Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. Then you come towards the second classification. The second type of women, the wives who were believers, but their husbands were neither here nor there. Like whom? Like Dulham bint Amr, the wife of Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, you should know his history. Profound history this person had. They say when he was young, he used to engage in many futuhat, many expeditions and many battles, especially when Islam was being expanded towards the different empires. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn used to take part in many of these battles. They say in one of these battles, he was sent as a soldier to the Far East, to the lands beyond Persia, and he took place in this particular battle. When this battle took place, the Muslims, his group of soldiers, they were victorious. And because they were victorious, they gained a lot of ghanaim, a lot of ghanima, a lot of war booty, coins, gold, silver, gems, rubies, land, production, vegetables, vegetations, and so on. So everything came into the hands of the Muslims. They were happy. They were overjoyed. They were now in the state of jubilation. They say one day, on the night when they gained victory, the general of that army came forward and he delivered a speech. He said, "My men, are you not happy today that you have been victorious and you have gained a lot in war booty?" And the people, they shouted, they roared, "Of course we are. We are happy men today, for that Allah has given us victory." His general then makes a statement. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn recounts all of this later on. He said that the general then came forward and he said, "If you," referring to his men, referring to his soldiers, he said, "If you in your lifetime come across a time when the sons of Muhammad and al-Mustafa are in need of help, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, then you should be extremely joyful, extremely happy to fight alongside them. Never choose the option to fight for those except other than the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. More and be overjoyed when you fight alongside them. More joy than you have received today through your victories." Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, these words didn't affect him very much. The reason why was because he was seen as an Uthmani. He was seen as a staunch supporter of Uthman ibn Affan. Politically, he supported the rulership of Uthman ibn Affan. And so, they say that when the Kufans were rallying against Imam Husayn alayhi salatu wasalam in Kufa and in the nearby cities around Kufa, when Zuhair ibn al-Qayn saw everything and everyone being excited, rallying against Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, he chose to remain neutral. He did not show support for example, the Kufans, nor did he show support for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Imam Husayn alayhi salam goes towards Hajj, Zuhair ibn al-Qayn goes towards Hajj. Now they are now coming back from Hajj. When they are coming back from Hajj, going towards the city of Kufa, they stop at a place known as Zarud. This place, Zarud, is where Abu Abdullah alayhi salam camps, and Zuhair ibn al-Qayn also establishes his own camp. Then Abu Abdullah alayhi salam finds out that Zuhair ibn al-Qayn is part of the congregation that has settled in Zarud. Immediately he sends a messenger towards Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. He says, Ya Zuhair, go and tell him, messenger, go and tell him that Abu Abdullah, the grandson of Rasulullah, summons him. The messenger goes, he enters the tents of Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. Zuhair is sitting there alongside all of his companions, he's having his dinner, and this messenger tells him that the grandson of Rasulullah has summoned you. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, he says, what do I have to do with the son of Rasulullah? If he wants me to support him, there is no support from me. Anyways, he shows no support for Imam Husayn alayhi salam. He comes and he recounts this story in a few moments to his wife. His wife, Dalham, she is a Shia, a believer. Someone who believes in the authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib and hence his sons. She says to Zuhair, he says, Ya Zuhair, the son of Rasulullah is calling you. Do you know how much of a prestige that is? That such an amazing personality has summoned you because he wants to speak with you. Go and listen to what he has to say. Worst comes to worst, just ignore him and come back and move on with your life. He says to his wife, you know what, that's true. As in worst comes to worst, if I reject whatever he has in plan for me, then I can move on with my life. As if nothing happened. He goes and he sits with Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. The narrations tell us that this sitting was very short. In fact, it was just a few moments. Within a few moments, he comes back to his wife. After his meeting with Abu Abdullah alayhi salam ends, he comes back to his wife. He says to his wife, my wife, Ya Dulham. He begins to pack all of his things and then he turns to his wife and he says, my wife, Ya Dulham, I am now divorcing you. I want you to go back to the city of Kufa. Allow me to join the camps of Abu Abdullah. If I join Abu Abdullah, I will not return. And this was a strategy employed by Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn knew that if his wife remained married with him, then when she found or she came to know that her husband has been slaughtered by the Kufids, by the army of Umar ibn Sa'id ibn Ziyad, they would then turn to her and they would prosecute her for being the wife of Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. But if the news goes around that no, Zuhair divorced his wife for whatever reason, then that relationship is no longer there. They can leave her in peace. She can come forward and give the excuse that, hey, I divorced my husband. I have nothing to do with my husband anymore. Whether he fought for this direction or that direction, it has nothing to do with me. So he divorces his wife and he tells his wife, go back to the city of Kufa. Go back to the city of Kufa in peace and move on with your life. Such a wife, Dulham bint Amr, it is difficult for her to depart from her husband. Over 40 years they were married together. And now the husband divorces the wife. Her heart is with him. She wants to join him and the camps of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. But her mind, her aql tells her that no, her responsibilities lies elsewhere. That she can uphold the message and the revolution of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, not necessarily having to be there on the 10th of Muharram in Karbala. She goes back to the city of Kufa and she lives on her life and she upholds the message of Abu Abdullah in her own way at whatever degree. So you find that Dulham, her heart, her belief, encouraged her husband Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, gave him that extra push to join the camps of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. So this is the second type of women, those who were believers, but their husbands were indifferent. But through their belief, they pushed their husbands to the state of belief as well. And then you have the third type of women who were seen as believers, but they were in the midst of disbelief. Their husbands, their sons, they were all part of disbelief. Like whom? You know, the Quran speaks about these examples. The Quran speaks about, for example, the likes of Asiya, the wife of Fir'aun. Fir'aun was a disbeliever, condemned personality in the Holy Quran. But her wife has a maqam in Jannah. Yes, his wife has a maqam in Jannah. Likewise, these personalities, although the husbands were evil, their wives have a maqam in Thawrat al-Husayniyya. They have a maqam in the revolution of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. You find, for example, there was a man by the name of Khul'i ibn Yazid. When they entered the streets of Kufa, Khul'i said, give me the responsibility to take the head of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam towards Ibn Ziyad. He takes the head and he goes towards the palace of Ibn Ziyad. The doors are closed. The doors are closed. So what does he do? He takes the head, he goes to his home. When he goes to his home, he tells his wife, he enters the house with such joy, with such happiness. He says to his wife, my wife, I have brought home something far more valuable than gold and silver. She's happy to hear this, yes? A wife is happy to hear that her husband has made profit in his business. She says, what have you brought home? He says, I have brought home the head of Abu Abdullah. When she looks at the head of the son, the grandson of Rasulullah, she begins to wail. She begins to scream and scorn at her husband. How dare you? A normal husband brings home gold and silver. You've brought home the head of the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. She turns to him, she says, Wallah khul'i, from this day onwards, I will never say a word to you. She cuts off all relationship with her husband. When she cuts off relationship with her husband, when Mukhtar leads his uprising, Mukhtar sends two generals to the house of Khul'i. For what reason? To go and execute Khul'i for his participation in Karbala. They enter the house of Khul'i. Khul'i finds out that these two agents are after him. What does he do? He enters the toilets and he hides in his toilet. These two agents, they come towards his wife. They say to her, where is Khul'i, your husband? She cries out. She cries out in a loud voice. She says, I do not know where my husband is. But she's pointing towards the toilets. She's calling out, she says to them, I don't know where my husband is. But she's pointing towards the toilets. They enter the toilets, they find Khul'i, they drag him out the house and they execute him. So you find the wife of Khul'i ibn Yazid was someone who was known to be a believer, a supporter of, for example, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. But at the same time, she did not show support to her husband. Then you have, for example, the likeness of Taw'a. Taw'a, what's the history behind Taw'a? They say Taw'a was a woman, she was a slave of whom? Ash'ath ibn Qais. Ash'ath ibn Qais. They say that he was a governor of Azerbaijan during the Khilafat of Uthman ibn Affan. Uthman, when he came, he supported the Bani Umayyah. One of the governors he chose was Ash'ath ibn Qais. Ash'ath ibn Qais, he becomes the governor of Azerbaijan. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam then comes towards the Khilafah. When he becomes the Caliph, he chooses to keep Ash'ath on board with the condition. He says to Ash'ath, he says, Ya Ash'ath, make sure that you do not eat from the public treasury. Rule amongst the people with justice. Do not encourage oppression. And do not take money from Bayt al-Mal. Nonetheless, you find Ash'ath ibn al-Qais, he takes money from Bayt al-Mal. He lets his desires overpower him. He uses the public treasury to meet all of his desires. There are some people who live only for this world. And that's exactly who this person was. In Nahj al-Balagha, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, what does he say about him? He says, عَلَيْكَ لَعْنَةُ اللَّاعِنِينَ هَائِكْ ibn هَائِكْ Munafiq ibn Kafir. He says, you, Ash'ath ibn al-Qais, you are a Munafiq, the son of a Kafir. He fires him as the governor of Azerbaijan. When he is fired, later on, they say that he conspires alongside Ibn Muljim in the execution of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Ash'ath ibn Qais is a mal'oon. Yes? The slave of Ash'ath, or one of the slaves of Ash'ath, is Taw'a. Taw'a, when she is freed by Ash'ath, Ash'ath frees her, she is freed by Ash'ath, and she carries on with her life. She marries a man by the name of Asid al-Hadrami. They have a son by the name of Bilal. Bilal, what does history tell us about Bilal? History doesn't tell us much about Bilal except that he is a mal'oon. La'natullah alayh. Why? Because this was the same Taw'a who on that day in Kufa, she opens the door, she sees a man sitting alongside her step. She says to him, "Oh man, what is it that you need?" The man says, "Oh woman, salamu alayki. Do you have some water that you can give me? I am very thirsty." Taw'a goes inside, she gives him a glass of water. And then she leaves him. She comes back a few moments later. She sees that he is still there. She says, "Oh man, have you drunk your water? Why are you still here? I'm sure your wife and your children are waiting for you. Go back to the home of your family." And then she leaves him. She comes back the third time. She says, "Oh man, you are now scaring me. Why is it that you are still here? I am waiting for my son to come back to me." Upon which this man turns around to her. He says, "Oh woman, I am a stranger in the city of Kufa. The city of Kufa that once belonged to my father, my uncle, yes, is a land which is a strange land for me now. I am a stranger in these very same lands." She says, "Who is your uncle?" He says, "My uncle is Ali ibn Abi Talib, and I am Muslim ibn Aqil. I am the nephew of Ali ibn Abi Talib." Yes, Taw'a, she caters for Muslim ibn Aqil, doesn't she? She takes him into his house, into her home. She looks after him. She gives him something to eat, something to drink. She gives him a bed to sleep on. But then when Bilal returns home, what does he do? He finds out that Muslim ibn Aqil is in his house. He goes and he informs Ibn Ziyad. This is when the soldiers came towards the house of Taw'a, and they dragged Ibn Ziyad out. They dragged Muslim ibn Aqil out of the house, out of her own home. Bilal gave him away to Ibn Ziyad. Mal'un! Yes, la'natullah alayh, for giving away Muslim ibn Aqil towards the oppressors. So you find that Taw'a, even though she had belief in her heart, her husband, her son, they were supporters of the Bani Umayyah. And you have many other examples. For example, the one who executed Burair, his wife and his sister came forward towards him and said, "Wallah, we will never speak with you again." They had belief in their hearts because they understood the position of Burair, famous companion of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. And so when you come across this particular discussion, you find that there were many women in that particular time who were part and parcel of the movement of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Even though their names may not shine in the books of history, they were nonetheless there. And we ought to remember them. And we ought to, for example, try and learn from them and the messages that they carried. And the biggest message, or the most prevalent message that they carried in their hearts, was that they were representatives of the movement of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. They chose truth over falsehood. They chose, for example, the hereafter above this world. And that's something that we all ought to remind ourselves in our daily lives. And of course, you have women the likes of Aqilat al-Zainab. You have women the likes of, for example, Kulthum and Sukaina and Ruqayya. All of them played a vital position in the movement of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. Not mentioning, for example, al-Banin, and so on and so forth. Each and every one of them had a phenomenal position. They all had a unique position in how they played a role in carrying the movement of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. They say that Abu Hamza Thumali, one day when he came towards Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, he sees the Imam alayhi salam crying and weeping. Imam alayhi salam is crying and weeping and wailing, as it was a norm for him to do so after the 10th of Muharram. Abu Hamza Thumali, he came one day towards the Imam. He says, "Yabna Rasulullah, why is it that you still cry like this? Allah has made this a normal thing for you and your family. Look at your father, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Look at, for example, look at your uncle Imam al-Hasan alayhi salatu was-salam. Look at, for example, your father Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Each and every one of them were executed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this a normal for the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam." He was trying to console The Imam, through these words, when Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam turns to Abu Hamza, he says, Ya Abu Hamza, shakar Allah sa'ayak ya Abu Hamza. He says, may Allah reward you, Ya Abu Hamza. You don't understand the pain that is there in my heart, Ya Abu Hamza. ولكني كل ما نظرت إلى عماتي وأخواتي وبناتي ذكرت فرارهن يوم عاشوراء من خيمة إلى خيمة. It says, Ya Abu Hamza, whenever I look towards my aunts, whenever I look towards my sisters, whenever I look towards my daughters, it reminds me of how they would run from one tent to another on the day of Ashura. When حتى ينادي المنادي احرقوا بيوت الظالمين. Especially when one of them came forward and called out, burn the tents of Husayn, burn the tents of Abi Abdullah. Ya Abu Hamza, they came towards our tents, our homes, and they began burning our tents. I saw the women running from one tent to another. I saw my children running from one tent to another, escaping from the fires of these tents. They say that Zainab, when the fires were engulfing the tents, Zainab came towards Imam as-Sajjad. She says, Yabna Rasulallah, oh my master, what is it that we should do? Imam alayhi salam replies, oh my aunt, run and run away from these tents. Gather the children, take the children and run far away from these tents. Oh my aunt, run towards the sands of Karbala, run towards the deserts of Karbala. Hamid ibn Muslim narrates, he says, when I saw the tents of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam catch fire, I saw one tent in particular catch fire, but Zainab was standing alongside this tent. The fire grew and the fire was so powerful. I turned to Zainab, I said, Ya Zainab, move away from this tent. Ya Zainab, move away from this tent. I saw the clothes of Zainab catch fire. I said, Ya Zainab, your clothes are on fire. Move away from this tent. Oh Zainab, do you not hear my call? Zainab turns around, she says, Ya Hamid, I hear your call. I see the fires that have taken on this tent, and I see the fires on my clothes. But what can I do? There is a man who is sick. There is a man who is ill in the middle of this tent. There is a man who cannot move. Help me move him from this tent. They say that Zainab, she gathered all the children on all the young ones and all the women, and she began counting the women, and she came to know that Sukaina is not there. Ya Sukaina, where are you, Ya Sukaina? She begins to panic, she begins to move from one place to another, she begins to run from one makan to another looking for Sukaina. Oh Sukaina, where are you? She then moves towards the body of Abi Abdullah. When she comes towards the body of her brother, she finds that Sukaina is embracing the chest of her brother Abu Abdullah. She comes towards Sukaina, she says, Ya Sukaina, come. What are you doing here? Come, let's go back to the women. Sukaina turns to her aunt, Ya Ammati, when I saw the enemies come towards us, when I saw them torch our tents, when I saw the fires take over our tents, I became afraid. So I came to my father's, and I know that my father would protect me. Ya Ammati, when I came to my father, I saw that they have taken his head. Where is the head of my father, Ya Ammati? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. سَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. If we can recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all our marhumin, inshallah, Surah Al-Mubarakat Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman.
اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، زینب کی لو خبر عابد ہے نا تمہاں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، دشت بلا کو چھوڑ کر خاک شفا کو اوڑھ کر، اے فقر کبریا سنو کہتی ہوں ہاتھ جوڑ کر، کیسے چلے گی ماں اے میرے نوجوان، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، قسمت کی پاس پا ہے وہ، خیر النساء کی جا ہے وہ، غربت کی انتہا ہوئی غیروں کے درمیان ہے وہ، شہزادی یہ جنا سہتی ہے سختیاں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، قاتل تیرا میرے پسر سجاد کا ہے ہم سفر، غم تو نہیں ہے یہ ستم سہتا رہا ہے وہ مگر، کیسے ساہے بلا بیمار سارے بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ میں نے سنی ہے یہ صدا کہتی ہے شام میں سبھی بدلہ علی کا لیں گے ہم، بنت علی سے آج ہی پتھر سے ہے بری لوگوں کی جولیاں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ نامحرموں کی بید میں اٹھتی نہیں نظر میری، عباس کی قسم نہیں تشنا لبی کا غم کوئی، تو کی ہے یہ میری جان سیمی ہے بیبیاں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ پالا ہے جس نے عمر بھر اکبر تجھے حجاب میں، غازی کے سامنے بھی وہ پیتا رہی نقاب میں، غیروں میں بیریدا ہے علماء، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ نو کیسی نا کو دیکھ کر یاور یہ کہہ رہی تھی ماں، آ دیکھ تو بھی نوجوان مادر کا اپنی امتحان، آنکھیں نہ بند کر غیرت سے آسمان، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ زینب کی لو خبر عابد ہے ناتواں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا۔ یا حسین یا حسین یا
السلام علیک یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیک یا نبی اللہ، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا سيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين أيها الشهيد بكربلاء. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذريتك علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباقر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي التقي الجواد وعلي بن محمد النقي الهادي والحسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والأمر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وجعلنا من أنصارك وأعوانك ورحمة الله وبركاته.